I think that, okay, is recording, and be aware, please, if you don't want to be included in the recording, then please, mute your microphone and that sort of thing. But yeah, so welcome to Granite State .NET Devs. Again, this is a monthly meetup. We usually meet on the third Thursday of every month. Used to be in person. We're gonna try to get back to that in the future. We've been experimenting with meeting at Manchester Community College here in New Hampshire for a little bit now, and we're kind of taking a break from that this month just because of the proximity of the holidays, and also because it seems like COVID's kind of ramped up again a little bit. It's probably maybe an abundance of caution, but that's the theme of 2021. So and 2020, it seems like, and hopefully 2022 will be better. It's hard to, well, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I won't go any further there anyway. So this session is what's new in the .NET framework. .NET framework, excuse me, it's not .NET framework anymore. It's just .NET 6, C# and Visual Studio stack. And we will, if you're not expecting that topic, then you're probably in the wrong session. But so it's sort of a presentation that I did at Granite State Code Camp a few weeks ago, and really enjoyed doing it. And of course, while I was giving that presentation, there were several others going on, and sort of a joke that, if you're in this session, then, not expecting that topic, then maybe you're in the wrong room or something. But anyway, I will move along here. So again, it's really, just welcome introductions, all that, the C# 10 and Visual Studio, .NET 6 and Visual Studio 2022, which have technically been out for a little bit now. So they're, this is not, if you're really, following what's going on with this stuff, it's not totally news, but at the same time, it's definitely, if you haven't had a chance to catch up on it, I really enjoy giving this presentation, and hope that you pick something up out of it. So I'm Jim Wilcox. I'm a Microsoft MVP in developer technologies. I've been an MVP since 2019 and still haven't gotten a chance to go to MVP Summit. I was really excited to do that, but the first opportunity, of course, happened to be in March of 2020. So go figure. I do these users groups. I'm really kind of the director of Granite State Code Camp, and really enjoy doing that every year. I help out with other events in the area as well. The New Hampshire Cybersecurity Symposium is coming up in just a couple of months, and I'm happy to help out with that. There's this group, and also Insight Digital Innovation. They're my employer. I work for them. We're consulting. Well, the Insight's core business is hardware and that sort of thing for large scale enterprises and all that. But we have a very strong consulting arm. Used to be what this area knew as Blue Metal, and a lot of the central U.S. area knew as Cardinal, and Cardinal Systems. But basically, we do consulting work in whatever tech stack you need, and help lots of people out in lots of different companies. So the book that's up here actually literally just hit the stores like 2-3 weeks ago now, and it's a book I wrote. It is not a technical topic, so I won't go too deep into that, but just psyched to say that I've got a book that finally came out, and if you're interested, you can probably do a search on the title and find it. But anyway, just to get a little idea where you folks are at. I know a couple of you, from in-person meetings and past meetings and stuff like that. But just curious, what kind of development. I'm guessing you're mostly Microsoft C#.NET Stack developers as well. Is that reasonable?
Yes.
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 C#. Yep. You are correct.
Just out of curiosity, I'm a little curious about this lately. I've been talking with friends in the industry about what kind of development people are doing with it. Just out of curiosity, you like doing mobile app or like universal or web app, or what kind of stuff you doing?
For me, I have been working on web development, and I've been focusing on Blazor server mainly, and I so much love it. I enjoy it so much. That's all I've been working on, Blazor.
Awesome.
Yeah, same here. We're using WebAssembly and the Web API, and that's one of the projects I'm involved with. And then we have our legacy application. We're trying to take the old and do it as a web app as opposed to a WinForm desktop application. And we're using 2022 for that as well.
Awesome.
Just web apps, but mainly back-end development with other microservices.
Gotcha. All right. Sujoy, I know you're on mute if you wanted to contribute. No obligation.
I just recently started a new job as a junior software developer, and it'll be like web-based, using the ASP model view controller.
Very cool. Awesome. Actually, I'm really kind of psyched to hear that you're talking about WebAssembly too, Don. That I was just talking with some of the guys at work today. It seemed like WebAssembly was like a really hot and upcoming technology, and then all of a sudden it kind of, well, I don't want to say it fizzled. It just stopped progressing, it seemed like. And I don't know exactly even where it's at. The last I recall, they were still struggling to get things like multi-threading processes and stuff like that going with it. And maybe they've come up with other alternatives for it. But
yeah, we're using Telerik. They have a lot of nice UI controls, and they're very heavily involved with Blazor. There's a few Microsoft people that moved over there. Ed Charbonneau, I think his name is, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Get the other person because he's on the more of the Xamarin side of things. But we're having really good success with it. A very rich web application that feels a lot like the desktop application that we're migrating. They did, I don't know, I guess they shortchanged. In 2022, .NET 6, they kind of left the Blazor developers hanging, and the IDE is slow, and they are working on a .1 release to kind of fix those issues. And it is hard because, they're getting all these different teams to release the product at the same time, and you're not going to hit every goal, every deadline there, but they are still working on things. And like the what is it? They enhance the edit and continue to call it hot reload, which just makes life a lot easier. Just a lot of different things that they're doing, and I think things will get better as time progresses. But what we've done so far is pretty nice.
Awesome. Just out of curiosity, you happen to be working with Lance McCarthy, or?
No.
Okay. I was just curious. He's been a regular contributor to this group in the past, so I didn't know if he might be connected to that. Awesome. So that's very cool stuff, and kind of helps me figure out a little bit where we're looking at stuff in this topic too. So So I apologize here. I've got a link. Actually, this kind of works out here, but this link right here is really this, and it'll be a little bit rough to see on the recording here, but this is in docs.microsoft.com, and this is their official, what's new in C# 10. And interestingly enough, it looks like they've updated this relatively recently, even since I wrote the slide deck. So it's definitely worth keeping a bookmark to this and stuff like that going forward. But that's the official source for a lot of the content in this presentation. And just wanted to make sure that got kind of called out. And so to begin with, one of the big new things in C# 9 was the record structs, and the record structs are basically intended to be sort of a little bit more secure than a classic struct. They're immutable, and they have a different version of identity than a classic structure, such as, like, for example, person one, being a record here, a record structure. It creates one instance right here with a set of information. Then they create another instance right here, and you can see immediately that person one equals person two in this example. And the interesting part about that is that these are a little bit more like structs in the sense that they're stored on the stack instead of the heap. But they have this sense of identity where when all of the values are the same, it is the same record. And so that's something you can use to your advantage. And a couple of things that they did was declare them so that they can be read-only. So you can't actually make a change to a record directly. That's why they created things like what they call withers. They made it so that you can copy a record to another one with a specific value changed, and then assign that back to a particular source. So like I said, this is demonstrating that this is not demonstrating a read-only record. This is actually directly changing a phone number on this. And then you can see that in the case of the reference equals, that these are not the same. But in the case of the equality, they are the same because they're actually both on the stack occupying essentially the same identity. So it's a really interesting concept. It definitely gives some interesting opportunities there for code. Worth checking out and using in certain circumstances where performance and stuff like that is important. And also data integrity. So that's what they're looking at there. They improved the structure types a little bit, so you can now have a parameterless constructor that can assign field or property values for read-only members at during the constructor, which is a little bit different than what they used to have. The use of that seems a little bit limited because you're talking about assigning fields or properties at construction time, but it's a parameterless constructor, so it has to always be the same value and that sort of thing. We'll see how useful that becomes going forward, but obviously they had a use case where they needed it, and so they added it. So now they also have two different concepts here. They've got a file scoped namespace declaration. So rather than the classic case where you'd say namespace, my namespace, and then curly braces, you would have all of the contents of what belonged in this file to that namespace. In this, rather than having curly braces at the end, you just declare it sort of like with your using statements at the top of the file, and everything in that file is declared as, you know, global. Actually, in this case, this is global across, no, sorry, this is file scoped. So file scope namespace declaration, but global using. So rather than having to repeat your using statements across every file in the system, because, you know, practically every file in your application probably uses a reference to system, you can just declare it once and have it work for every file in the whole project. So nice addition as far as that goes. Just helps clean up the code a little bit and make it a little less less of a barrier to entry for people who are coming on board and don't necessarily know that they have to do that. So this is sort of an interesting concept that, you know, in C#8 they added this ability to write data classes a little bit more like JSON. So you can declare a you know, structure with, you know, curly braces and say property 1 : you know, is defined as being this anonymous class of property 2 with a pattern, you know, whatever as far as that goes. It's not too bad. It's a nice start. It's very much like JSON as far as that goes. It's a useful thing that I've maybe seen once or twice, but this syntax for C#10, which is new, simplifies that code just a little bit. So rather than having to say property 1 : and then in another object it's property 2, you can basically define property 1 as already having this property 2 sort of, you know, declaratively in line, and its value is pattern. And so it simplifies the syntax a little bit, makes it a little bit clearer that property 1 is an object with property 2 as a, you know, a member, and its value is pattern. So I'm kind of blasting through this here because there's a lot of stuff to go over here, but I'll pause for a minute. Are there any questions so far? Or?
No.
All right.
My question is for to look at code examples. Can we find that all on MSDN to see code examples?
Yep. There's lots of great examples in this. This is excuse me. This is this page here, and you can actually see through here. I could have potentially, you know, some of these I literally pulled right off this page. And to some extent, I could kind of go through this document just as easily as I could my slide deck. But you know, basically, I skip around a little bit differently in this presentation than, you know, from what's in the document. It looks like they've edited a little bit, but yeah, definitely take a look at that web page, you know, for more examples and stuff like that. And actually some of them I actually screen scraped a little bit here too. So I think this probably was a screen scrape of that specific page. So this is assignment and declaration, the same, you know, same deconstruction. So you can declare an int of type, you know, an anonymous class right here. So this is essentially declaring an anonymous class. And because it happens to have the same members X and Y and of the same type, you can assign a point to it, which is kind of cool. So in this particular case, they're doing something a little bit different. They're now saying that you can do assignment to multiple properties, and these are individual things here, but you can treat it like an anonymous type, sort of like this, and assign a point to it, and it just works because it understands the concept of what a point is and whoops and all that. but you couldn't mix and match the two types before. In C#10 you can. So you can say, I have a variable, local variable X of value 0. I'm going to create an anonymous type, and it's composed of this integer X and this integer Y, and I'm going to assign the value from point. And so you can then access X and Y as you might have before, and it just works a little more intuitively. It's a less of a barrier there. So how often you mix and match those, we'll see. We'll see how much mileage folks get out of that, but it is nice to know that it won't be a problem if you do it. So let's see, improved definite assignment. So what they ran into was a situation where they had an error that didn't really work in prior to C#10. This is again sort of scraped from that page, but what we're looking at here is converting this to a Boolean and getting this out object right here. And in the process, it's got this out object, and it didn't like this because it didn't understand the type of object. And so in that case, or in a similar case, this one here, it wouldn't necessarily evaluate this, and so the compiler would have a hard time. Oh, because these are lazy evaluating. That's what the issue is. So in this case, where this is going to be false, this operator here, because it's a lazy evaluation, it says this is false, so I'm not even going to bother looking at this part. And so you'd get to this, and object wouldn't be defined because it never got to this. Okay, and it's a similar thing right here. If C is null, it will never do this part in classic C#. And so this would cause it to be an error. So the improvement that they made was that it still figures out, the compiler still figures out that this should be a valid object. Maybe it's null, maybe it'll break, but under certain circumstances. But the advantage of this is that it at least understands that there can be a type there, and so in the cases where it should work, it does without a compiler error. So that's just a case of fixing what I would almost call a bug in the language.
I feel that's subjective.
Yeah,
A little bit.
Well, maybe. Under the circumstances, because you shouldn't expect these things to necessarily. You should expect them to be type aware when you get through here. And the problem is that these weren't even compiling; these would actually error out.
Sure.
During the compilation, and yeah, I could kind of get that. How often do you want to sort of conditionally declare a variable like that and expect to be able to use it?
You could do like obj $?2string.
Yeah.
If you could get a null back. But I've always had it ingrained about short circuit evaluation. It's just not going to do anything more if the first part of the end is false.
Yes. Yep. And I don't think it actually executes these under those circumstances. It's just that the compiler carries forward the type information. That was a problem before. So it's more of a compile time thing than a runtime change, but but it's more intuitive there.
Mm-hmm.
I think. So you can now also have constants in interpolated strings. it feels like this is kind of one of those, it should have been that way. I think I remember actually running into this relatively recently where I tried to put, constant string as, a value like this, a my string equals a, and that's constant, and this wouldn't work in C# prior to 10, which seems totally counterintuitive. You would think that would, that would just work, but apparently they had to make a change to C# to get that to fix. So I'd almost kind of categorize that as a little bit of a bug fix as well. But
that I agree with.
yeah. Any questions to this point? All right. So let's see. Allow async method builder on methods. This is a performance tuning, creating the custom async method builder. So basically this was something behind the scenes in order to help them build your async methods under the hood. That it basically had a problem with performance, and I don't recall all of the underlying details, but this is more of a sort of under the covers kind of thing that is worth calling out, but it's not something that you really have to worry too much about. It's just sort of an undercover performance improvement. Let's see. Then we got the color argument expression. So in this particular case, this is sort of about validating your content, making sure that that this is included the way it should. So you can sort of assign an expression to condition that the message was assigned properly. So it's an interesting attribute that you put on a parameter like this that says, all right, you don't have to be assigned a value here, but if you aren't, set this to true. And so that way there, if this is false, you can actually raise an invalid operation exception. I think that there's going to be more advanced conditions that, or more advanced examples of places where this makes sense. I think it might make more sense in maybe web API calls or something along those lines where, for example, you might have a couple of variations, and I'm thinking of like, a web API signature method that maybe takes a structure and a value, and the value happens to be one of the values of the structure. So you could potentially have this expression assign that property back to the root level, the scalar value. So yeah, it's another one of those. I'm not sure how often that would be useful, but it's there if you need it. And again, I really think web APIs are, especially if you're trying to smooth them out and make them work, keep them compatible with older versions of the web API or something like that. When you introduce new structures or something like that, that might be handy there. So that's basically it for the C# 10 stuff. That kind of gets us into what's new in .NET 6 itself, and this kind of comes from a couple of different places. That I called out the URLs for. I won't go to the websites for these right now, but these are where most of the information for these come from. But anyway, basically what they've done is really tried to drop the barrier to entry for people. And if you remember, like classic C# file, when you want to make a console application, you had to make sure that you had a namespace, and you had to have a class declaration, and within the class you had to have a main method and all that stuff. In the new .NET 6 C# 10 world, you can just have a C# file that only contains this. You can write it, run it, compile it, let it fly, and it just works. It's a little more reminiscent of the classic days of writing code, where it makes it feel a little bit more script-like, and it's much more accessible to new developers, and that sort of thing feels a little bit more natural to people coming from like a script-based language or something like that. Very similar idea for web applications, where they really simplified C# down to just a couple of lines here to set up the system, and then you map your root web call and give it your basic. I mean, this is basically right here. This segment of this line is back up. If you stop and think about what we're looking at here, this is both a route and a controller method all in one line here, and then this gets the runtime going. So it's kind of just about bare minimum. I mean, maybe at some point they could get to the point where you don't need these two lines. But then we're starting to get really spooky with the language. So I think this makes sense as far as that goes. Any questions as far as that goes?
Nope.
Yeah. All right. So I didn't have a whole lot to say about this, but Visual Studio is now able to, I think, build for Mac OS, and also, of course, for Windows ARM64. That was a little bit of an issue. They were sending out confusing messages about how that was going to work out and all that stuff. But now they've got that sorted out, and you can now build for those targets. I can't remember if I've got a slide for this or not, but Visual Studio itself, did I say something? Oh no, that's Visual Studio. So okay, so this is targeting Mac OS and Windows ARM64, which is relatively new in the whole .NET 6 world and all that stuff. It's really just kind of a yay, we can do that now. The ARM64 feels a little bit more significant because I don't know too many people who are trying to build from Mac OS with Visual Studio, but they added a new random number generator, and I always get a kick that they qualify it as pseudo random numbers. It's like, because I guess on some level they can't completely guarantee it's forever and always fully random, but if it wasn't random enough before, it's random enough now. And this is an example right here of just generating an array of random bytes, 100 random bytes, and you can just go through that and use it that way. Relatively nice as far as that goes. There's other use cases there to look at, but a little bit different than the concept that they had, which is a random number between 0 and 1, and you pick the magnitude and multiply it out and all that fun stuff. But so let's see, new parallel for each async method, which is very nice, very potentially dangerous, but very cool. So you can do, in parallel, for each asynchronous and have it execute those all on a thread pool. And that is a pretty cool feature. So that means that you can kick off a whole bunch of URLs to download and, have a process that does them and then just await the whole set, right here with this await, for example. Whoops, didn't mean to move forward there. So that's this await right here. I take it you guys, can you see where I'm pointing here now?
Yes, I can see it. Await
Okay.
parallel. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So this is basically doing an await on this array for each of those URLs to pass them in and get the information asynchronously, and neither one waits on the other. They both execute in parallel, which is very nice. So now what we've got, the read and write files without using a file stream. This was one of the kind of odd things about the WinRT framework, is that you had to have a file handle, a file stream to do everything, and so now they have a handle, so you can do it that way instead, which is a little bit more like old-fashioned, feels a little bit like a step, not exactly backwards, but it's not a bad thing. It's just sort of I guess sort of bringing back something they had because people were missing it, I guess. So, let's see. Now you can also access process IDs and paths a little bit more easily. So knowing the process ID of the process that you're in, sometimes important. Also knowing your process path. That used to be a little bit of a trick. You used to have to do tricks with the, playing with the assembly and, figuring out what the path to the assembly was and, all that fun stuff. This just, simplifies that, so you don't have to, get fancy with, manipulating strings just to figure out something that ought to be pretty well known. The required configuration section helper. So this is basically saying that, if you have your settings configuration and somehow it's missing this, it kind of feels a little bit funny to me, because you could always require a section pretty easily in the past. You try to access it and don't put any error checking on it, and it will blow up if it's not there. So this just causes it to throw an exception differently if you have a section that's required, and just by adding this get required section, it throws an exception that makes it much more clear what the problem is. And so the nice part about this is that you will be able to detect more quickly and easily that the problem is that you're missing a required section, rather than getting to the point where you're getting a null reference exception, which would be the classic case before this. You just discover that you've got this object that's supposed to have a configuration in it, and it's null, and why is it null? So throwing this on there is actually a nice way to go, so that you can more readily understand why something's breaking in the QA environment when it works fine everywhere else. Because the QA section is QA configuration hasn't been updated properly. That's why. So this is sort of an interesting concept here. You can take an IEnumerable and batch it using link. So this is kind of like kind of reminds me of doing paged results and like a reporting mechanism where you get like thousands of returns from a database and you only want to look at like 20 of them at a time and in multiple pages. So you can say I want 0 to 9 and I want to chunk it up in groups of 3s and throw them into that chunk value right here, so you'll get 3 at a time and then you'll get another 3 at a time, and so on and so forth. So this is a handy thing. This might actually be a good thing to use in conjunction with the for each parallel array. So you could actually, if you want to manage the number of instances of threads running to download like a whole bunch of URLs or, something like that kind of thing, where you can say just only do a certain smaller number at a time and go from there. Any questions through this point?
None from me. No.
All right. So this is kind of another nice new link feature built into the framework. So say you've got this method that gets a bunch of people structures all initialized with various ages, various bits of information. You can say, get me the oldest person of the maximum by this property. So you can get the oldest person using max by, and the youngest person, same, the min by, and figure out, who's who in these particular sorts, which is something that used to be a fair amount of additional work. If you wanted to do that individually, you certainly could, but it was a few extra steps. This is optimized. Not a bad thing to take advantage of when you get the opportunity. Let's see. So now we get the powers of 2 method, which is kind of nice. I find myself thinking that, rather than, I mean, it just simplifies a little bit of syntax, because you can do this pretty quickly otherwise. But so this is saying, imagine you get a buffer or some array of characters or something like that that's some random number, but you need a buffer and you want to just make it a power of 2, because it's always easier to have your arrays and stuff like that fit inside a power of 2 sized structure. There's occasional opportunities to do that, and you can just say round up to a particular power of 2 if it's not already, and it will come up with, like in this particular case, 255, and you'll have a buffer of that size, and that's a relatively cool thing. So it's basically these couple of methods here. So the bit operations namespace or class there. And so this is, yield incomplete await, with wait async. So you can have, a task kickoff with some long running operation, and you can also then say wait async for a particular timeout, and it will return. So this is the thing that's different from the way a timeout would have worked on these before, was that if this like timed out, if you set a timeout on a wait operation like this, it, generally speaking, rather than returning a result, it would return an error and you wouldn't be able to get anything. So now what's different about this is that you can actually get 20 seconds worth of results from, say, a 5-minute operation. So it will actually allow you to see what you got in this 20 seconds that you're defining here, rather than sort of forfeiting that for the sake of the timeout. So it's kind of a nice addition there, is that you don't forfeit the results for hitting your timeout before you get there, before you finish your call there. So let's see. As far as the no longer needing null checks, you can actually just call this static method on the argument null exception, and it's just a little bit cleaner to read, other than the fact that you don't have to say, if null. There's another way to do this that I had kind of gotten used to, and that was basically using the double question mark and then throw, if in the follow on to that. But this is cleaner looking, it's nicer, it's easier to read and understand. So nice addition. Any questions there?
Nope.
All right. So let's see here. So this is actually a really, really nice alternative to what they had before. It actually kind of feels like this should have been in there like long ago, but you get to create a periodic timer that basically pulses the the await on a task every time it ticks. So you give it a time span, and then every time that time span triggers, it will pulse this await, and you'll get the now, and so you can just do what this is showing here, await it and keep on going, and get that event every time. It's really, it's kind of funny because I looked at this and thought that's new, but yeah, I guess it is. They didn't really have anything quite like this periodic timer before. The timer that they had before was event based. You'd have to set up an event to call back on it, and so this is a pretty nice addition to the framework here. Let's see. So that's pretty much it for the C# and .NET 6. We're cruising through this at pretty good clip here, but that gets us into Visual Studio 2022. But before we get there, are there any questions about what we've talked about so far? Or?
I have a question. It's a little different, and I was wondering, do you know anything about MAUI? Was that released with 6.0 MAUI for the new mobile development, or that's still not? I'm curious to see what that looks like. MAUI.
Yeah, I am aware of MAUI, and I am also aware of the fact that they did not release it with .NET 6 and Visual Studio 2022. It will be coming with an update relatively soon, but they just didn't feel like they were quite ready for it.
Okay.
And I do wish I had more detail on that. I don't. I'm not exactly sure what the situation was there, but they are still working on it, and it will be coming soon. it does muddy the story for classic development across cross-platform.
Okay.
You know, because it's like, all right, if you want to write a .NET application, C#, cross-platform, you know, including iPhone and Android and stuff like that, what's the best platform to use? And the answer to that is a little bit muddy. There's until Maui comes out, there's no clear winner for that. And so, you know, it's like I am kind of almost glad I haven't had to answer that question relatively recently because of that. I would still love to see Uno platform be the answer to it. But the biggest issue that I have with that is that Uno platform is, it's not really third party. It's just not the Microsoft answer. And it's not that I'm stuck with living in the Microsoft world. I definitely don't mind doing what you might call third party. And Uno platform is definitely well supported and well loved by Microsoft people. It's just it doesn't seem to be what Microsoft wants people to get into, and that's a little bit scary if you're a you know, a developer. It's like, I don't want to throw my weight behind something that Microsoft might not throw its weight behind. And that's a tough situation as far as that goes. So that's why I've been kind of watching, you know, like the whole story with Blazor and story with WebAssembly and all of that stuff is very interesting, because in a lot of ways that's kind of becoming the de facto cross-platform solution. You can run those things on anything, and they look and feel pretty native, but you kind of give up some of the native platform capabilities doing that too. So so trade-offs abound as always, but yeah, but that's the state of all of that right now. I really am looking forward to Maui coming out, but it's not quite there yet. And so that kind of gets us into Visual Studio 2022. And there's some really cool, interesting things. You know, I remember years ago when Microsoft was telling everybody it's time to go 64-bit and, you know, make that happen. And, you know, it reminded me a lot of when everything was 16-bit and Microsoft said, all right, it's time to go 32. I've been around in the industry long enough to have seen that transition. And so Microsoft did the same sort of thing again when 64-bit became the thing, but Visual Studio stayed in the 32-bit world, and that always kind of surprised me. But Visual Studio 2022 is the first build of Visual Studio that is not 32-bit. And that was kind of a big deal. They you know, it was a pretty big effort, and literally took them years to get to the point where they could finally offload the 32-bit stuff and go 64-bit. So very cool as far as that goes. Nice to know. And the tools do run, I want to say it runs a little bit faster. I can't necessarily tell the difference because they did a lot of performance improvements in 2019, but does feel a little faster. But of course, with that, the trade-off is that it's a little bit larger too, because, you know, hey, you got twice as many bytes for the 32-bit, but that's not a major thing. Nowadays, bytes are cheap, so. So this is another interesting feature 2022 is that where Intellicode used to be able to code complete statements, now it can autocomplete whole lines of code for you. So as you start to type out your statement, it can kind of make artificial intelligence based guesses at what the rest of the whole line might be. And that's a very nice time saver and all that stuff. I almost took this out just because it seems kind of obvious, but hey, it really is a new feature. It's something that's baked into Visual Studio 2022. Yeah, you can upgrade 2019 to support them, but it's baked into 2022 from the get-go. So it was worth leaving it in the slide deck here. They upgraded the Xaml Designer. Xaml Designer had kind of, especially for UWP and stuff like that, and I hesitate to use UWP. I mean WinUI, because UWP is dead. But XAML Designer is upgraded and improved, performance enhancements, fewer designer crashes and stuff like that. So hot reload is enabled and all that by default, which is a nice thing. Definitely appreciate all of the stuff that they put into that. I kind of get a kick out of this one. It's like we removed features and claim victory on it. So, so I mean, I get it. The legacy Team Explorer in the Git GUI for Visual Studio. You don't need it really anymore because the newer Git GUI stuff does it better. They don't need the GitHub extension anymore, so they pulled out there used to be support specifically for the GitHub extension, and they don't need that anymore either. It's all more native anyway, so why keep that in there as a separate thing? So again, it was I kind of chuckled about this, that they pulled features out and declared victory, which is cool. We'll take it. It's making things faster and smoother and less things for them to worry about in terms of defects that they need to maintain and stuff like that. They updated the web tools. There's an improved publish mechanism, and I haven't seen that yet, but I'm looking forward to checking it out. With DevOps, I find myself using the publish built in Visual Studio less and less often, but once in a while it can be handy, especially if you're just trying to prove out something. The connected services, that's you can pop up Service Explorer directly from the connected services, display and all that stuff. That's nice feature as far as that goes. And the minimal API templates, that's actually what we showed. That support is actually, where was it? Right here. So what they're talking about is the ability to write a single C# file that only contains this and have it usefully do hello world. So that's support that's built into the minimal API template. So that kind of gets us to, they've got a bunch of features that are still in the works. Actually, I think some of these may be in there, and it's definitely worth taking a look at the latest features, because back when I put this together, these were all announced features that were coming but hadn't quite made it. So in addition to Xamarin Maui, you know, the web live preview, instrumentation profiler, Azure Cloud Service Project support. That's a feature that I'm looking for. The T-Sql Debugger, which is interesting. You know, the ability to potentially like set breakpoints in T-Sql code as it's executing on a SQL server is a really cool feature that used to be reserved for like Redgate tools and stuff like that. I don't even know for sure if they support that, but very nice capability there. Web load test, test controller, test agent, all that fun stuff is coming. More Azure Data Lake support. The UI test. Obfuscator kind of confuses me because I could have sworn that that's been around for a long time. I guess, you know, integrating that a little bit deeper into Visual Studio, maybe not as an extension or using extension tools, but more natively, I guess. But having the Incredibuild integration, Incredibuild is for those who haven't caught, you know, what's going on there. Incredibuild is a feature of being able to build, distributing the build load across a ton of different servers across the cloud. And, you know, therefore, you know, instead of building it all on one machine and having it take 10 minutes, you can run it through this Incredibuild thing and distribute the build across lots of different machines and literally have a 10-minute build take seconds, which is pretty amazing. I haven't played with that feature yet, but I'm definitely looking forward to that. I also am really looking forward to the Intellicode find and replace by example. So you can give it. It's basically a step up on regex search and replace. You can just say, you know, find things that look kind of like this and replace it with stuff that looks more like that. And, you know, I'm looking forward to that functionality as well. So you know, lots of cool stuff. Even though Visual Studio 2022 is already out, and they're still making improvements, and some of this is still coming through. But you know, you might even discover, like I say, this is only a few weeks. The slide is only a few weeks old, but some of this may already be out. I haven't had a chance to go back and update this and see that that's there or not yet, but definitely stuff to look forward to in addition. So don't know exactly when these are hitting, but I would expect relatively near term, like, you know, if you're looking to make the switch, you know, just soon with a little trademark indicator after it. So, and that actually is, I think, where I'm at with that. Yeah. Somehow I got my slides a little bit backwards. This should have been the blank slide that was back a few here, but that's basically what I got. Happy to talk a little bit more if anybody's got any particular questions or any features that you're particularly excited about. You know, we can definitely you know, dig around and look at those. But that's the bulk of the content here. I definitely went through this faster today than I did the last time I did this presentation. So,
are you using it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I am, well, to be fair, I am using it in all of my sort of side projects. I do like little test projects and stuff like that, just to prove out concepts and all that stuff. And occasionally I'll build a chat bot or pull up a sample or something like that. My client doesn't have a license for it, and so I'm kind of stuck with 2019 with them. And that's where I'm spending the bulk of my day still. So I don't get to use it as much as I'd like to, but I'm definitely using it pretty much on a daily basis. So for one thing or another. And if I had my choice, I'd totally just abandon Visual Studio 2019 and jump to it completely. The only other reason that I haven't done that on my client anyway, just despite the fact that they haven't got a license for it, is the machine that I'm using on their network that I have to use doesn't have a lot of disk space, and I can't afford to have both installed on it. So that's my biggest real drawback there. Otherwise, I probably would have installed it anyway. So, but that'll change soon enough. They'll upgrade, and once they figure that it's stable enough, they'll make that change, and we'll be able to get rid of 2019 altogether.
What about the Community Edition 2022? What do you think about that? That's what I have installed on my own computer that I'm just playing with, and I built a web API with it this morning, and it was very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got to admit, I haven't played with Community Edition myself in a long time. I know that Visual Studio 2022 is faster and a lot of different ways, and being able to write code in it to just get going with a project is a lot better no matter which edition you're using. The real big differences across the editions, and I think that they're down to primarily they've got their Classic Pro and Enterprise editions. I don't think that they even call it Enterprise anymore. I think they I can't remember what they call Enterprise now, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, we're on Enterprise.
Yeah, I guess I could have sworn I remembered hearing them say that they were changing the name of that to something, but maybe I'm thinking of something else. But yeah, I mean, it's additional features that you're only going to get on a large scale team, and stuff like that. So Community Edition is pretty good. The Pro Edition gets you the things that you have to have on a team, like the collaboration tools and cloud-based tools and stuff like that you might not get otherwise. And then the Enterprise is where you get the the performance tuning and enterprise level diagnostics and testing at scale and stuff like that. So really, at the level of hands-on software development, tactical software development, they're very, kind of same at that level, and I definitely appreciate that, because I spend, probably most of what I do, 90% of what I do is in Visual Studio is tactical software development anyway. So, it works out pretty well there. I don't know if that helps really or not, but
yeah, that helps. But I've never used this before. Can you use a Community Edition to build a production application? Is that okay or no?
There's nothing that says that you can't technically, but there are workloads that you're going to have to find a different solution for. And by that, I mean, you know, there are certain things that you can't get to, and I can't recall. Let me take a look at the edition stuff here. So let me pull up one of these. So, okay, so basically what they're looking at, you know, for the most part, the basic supported, you know, individual developers, of course, classroom academic, you know, these are the usage scenarios that are supported. and of course, this is where it gets differentiated at this level. But this is just licensing, and so it's not about what you target. So you can build a production application and deploy it, and you know, shrink wrap it and sell it, and you know, that sort of thing with the community edition, no problem. It's really just who you are and what role you are as a developer at that level. So if you're developing for a company and, you know, you've got more than 5 users on your team, then by license, you have to have an enterprise, professional or enterprise edition license. You know, but then there are, you know, other features here and there, you know, like, you know, things like these, you know, architecture validation and layer diagrams and all that stuff that are only supported in enterprise. Code lens, which is, you know, making sure that, you know, it's sort of like a lint type thing that looks at your code and helps you figure out what should be and shouldn't be and that sort of thing. It's only partially supported in community, but yeah, it's not bad as far as that goes. You know, all of these other scenarios are supported across all 3. You know, you don't get IntelliTrace until enterprise, or, you know, .NET memory dump analysis. These are really advanced, you know, capabilities anyway, and in you know, scale applications and stuff like that. That's where you need that stuff anyway. So so it's actually, you know, it's a pretty good set of functionality for the free edition. Though notice that, you know, when it comes to testing, it's all at the enterprise level. So if you have people doing testing, yeah, you can do the unit testing, but you know, all of this stuff is enterprise level only. And you know, similar stuff like interestingly, the Xamarin Inspector and Xamarin Profile are only at the high end, but all of these other features for cross-platform are there, and everything in the actually, I was talking earlier about the collaboration tools and capabilities and stuff like that. All versions have all of that, so you know, I was actually off base as far as what I said there. So,
Okay.
So it's really primarily about the, you know, the advanced, you know, high end, you know, functionalities. You know, being able to look at your architectural layer diagrams and, you know, view your .NET memory dumps and, you know, that kind of stuff that that you miss out on. But you know, if you can get your application out without those things, then you're fine anyway. So any other questions? Or
I'm good. Not from, yeah, I'm good.
yeah, it's a lot of information to kind of go through and you know, digest, but you know, definitely, you know, take a look at that. Where did that website that I was looking at before here? I think, yeah, this guy right here. This is a great page. A lot of great stuff to dig out of this just in terms of C# 10. The other URLs that are now in the video that'll be posted on the Granite State users groups YouTube channel shortly after this meeting. I'll upload that, but those URLs will be in that video as well, and definitely worth following up on those just to make sure that you've got all the latest information there. But lots of cool stuff, generally speaking, to make life easier and all that. So can you still see what I'm sharing here? I feel like I'm not sharing. I stopped sharing and I'm sitting here talking about websites, and I apologize, because this is what I was looking at for the comparison. Did you see that?
No.
Oh, I apologize.
I can see it.
I can see it now.
Okay, so you see it now. Okay, so this is what I was reading over when I was talking about it before. But this is Visual Studio /VS/compare, and it's literally showing you graphically what the differences are between editions here. And I apologize, I could have sworn I was sharing this on my screen when I was talking about it, but definitely worth taking a look if you have questions there. But
yeah, I can see it now. Now they don't have Visual Studio Code listed. I wonder why it's separate.
So Visual Studio Code is a very different tool. I mean, yeah, ostensibly they're the same sorts of things, and for a long time I was actually thinking that Visual Studio Code would end up replacing Visual Studio. And it's kind of interesting because I see Visual Studio Code as kind of it's definitely become the IDE for so many different coding workloads, and yet everything that it does is better in Visual Studio. And there's a free edition of Visual Studio Classic, so I guess the big advantage to Visual Studio Code is that it's one IDE that runs consistently and the same on every platform practically. You can run Visual Studio Code on Mac and Linux and all that stuff. So you can't really do that still with Visual Studio Classic. So I guess that's the advantages that they're offering a unified IDE for developers across platforms through Visual Studio Code. But everything Visual Studio Code does, Visual Studio Classic does better as far as I'm concerned. So, but I still use Visual Studio Code. So,
yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah, for especially for web workloads, I find that Visual Studio Code it's nice, it's lightweight, and I don't tend to get it confused with Visual Studio itself. So I have, an instance or two of Visual Studio Code up for certain workloads, and Visual Studio Classic up for others, and I'll switch back and forth and not worry about confusing which one I'm looking at. So
yeah, that's right.
There's also JetBrains Writer. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah.
That's a very nice tool too. It's got a lot of features. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of positive things about it, and one of our developers is using it, and he thinks it's better than Visual Studio, at least for the Blazor development.
Oh yeah, of course, it's way better than Visual Studio. Honestly speaking, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine for Blazor and certain web workloads and stuff like that. I suspect that it's probably. I honestly don't know what it would be like with like a desktop native or cross-platform like Xamarin or something like that. But I could easily imagine web-based technologies for sure.
Mhm.
But I haven't played with Rider either, so I can't really talk to that.
Yeah, same here.
But so that's all I've got for this month. Unless there's any other questions or thoughts as far as that goes.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very nice. Got lots of information. Yeah.
Thanks.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, thank you all for coming, and I hope that you all have a great holiday season if you're in the holiday season and enjoying it. And our next meeting won't be till next year,
Yeah.
Okay.
which always sounds fun to say, but in the meantime, we do host what we call Granite State Code Review Nightly. So Granite State Code Review Nightly was a literally every weeknight at 9 p.m. Eastern. So it's after the day is pretty much over for most people. Every weeknight. So tonight included. We just get together and talk shop. It's no agenda. It may or may not be mostly about code. Sometimes we talk about the cool new machine that one of the guys built, or we talk about what the best way to get dug in on JavaScript is, or help somebody nail their technical interview for a job interview they've got coming up, or spend time helping people figure out how to do a presentation for a community like this one, and participate in Granite State Code Camp or some other community event that way. So we kind of do a sort of holistic shop talk sort of thing where everybody contributes a little bit. So again, that's part of this .NET developers group, and if you found this .NET developers group on meetup.com, you'll probably find the Code Review Nightly is also listed there. So but optional. If it's interesting to you, please feel free to show up, and if it's not, we'll catch you next time. And in the meantime, I guess I'll let you go and get back to compiling and
Debugging.
Yeah.
yeah. And thank you for coming, and hope you have a great holiday.
Yeah, thanks. You
Thanks
too.
to you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks again.
Happy
for coming.
holidays.
All right. All right. Take care.
Bye.